So inside the body is moving. The upper jaw, lower jaw is moving. See, lower jaw is moving up and down. So everywhere there will be the friction. For example, I wanted to rub these two hands. What will happen after some time? Will get heat. So when heat is generated, continuously rubbing, the bubbles will form. Then after that also you are rubbing, swing will cut off. Same way, if you are not applying grease or oil for the gears or the machine parts, the parts become jammed, will get heat and melt off if it is in the speed. For example, you know very well dead center of the lathe. You are not using grease at the point. After some time, the center will burn off. That will become welded. Do you know friction welding? When it is continuously rotating like this, the two parts are joined, that become friction welding. So like that, friction is the force, resistance offered to motion. Only one word. The body is not moving because of the friction. That is the static friction. The body is moving because of the friction. That is sliding friction. The body wheels are rolling like this. That is the rolling friction. For example, tires of the lorry, then wheels of the lorry, wheels of the bus, wheels of the train, wheels of anything. Because of the friction that is rolling. In the bearing also there is a friction. You are taking ball bearing which is used in the fan. There is a friction because of two surfaces are contacting between the balls and the race. The inner race will be there, outer race will be there. Between the two races the balls are provided. Because of that, balls are rotating. When the fan gets a movement, that means magnetic power, then it starts to rotate, either directions, how you are giving the connection. Then that will rotate. When that fan is rotating because of the friction, balls reduced the friction, that means that's why full night it is rotating, will not get heat because of the ball bearing. When it is bush bearing is provided for that. When starting olden days fans, if you have, you can see the bush bearing inside the table fan. These days all ball bearings we are using. So ball bearings reduce the points contact only this much. Then bush is continuously rotating. There is a hole like this. In this the shaft is provided like this. The shaft is provided. In that it is rotating. Area contact will be more. In this case only ball. Ball means only contacting area this much only. In the ball bearing. That's why area of the contact also reduced. The surface finish also more. That's why it will give longer life. That's why the fans are giving 7 years, 5 years, 2 years, 3 years guarantee in the material. So like that, the advantages over, disadvantages over, reducing the friction over. Once again I am telling you, what is a friction? Friction is the resistance offered to motion. Motion means the body is not moving, that is stopping because of the friction. It is staying because of the friction. We wanted to start this. The friction is needful, then only it is moving. If friction is not there, it's like this. How it will go? It will go any direction. There is no guarantee. That means slip off. Then for example tires are worn out. Sometimes it will be slip. Because of the slipness, the required speed will not get. Because you are not applying, for example, you are riding the cycle. Then you are not using oil. You have to use more force now. then you are applying more force, what will happen? The bars will break off after getting heat. Then damaged, then you go for repair. The same way you are not using oil for the machine, the surfaces become spoiled because of the friction. Then you are not using oil, the machine will take more power. Then when more power is taking, it reduces the speed. If the power is same, we are using 5 HP motor, the load is taking more because you are not using oil, then in that case the speed will be reduced. If you put oil, it will go smooth. You have an idea about bicycle. When you apply oil for that bicycle, then it will go freely. The same way, whenever you are using the machine, apply all lubricating points daily to reduce the friction. That means to get free movement. The friction can be reduced by using oil, by using ball bearings, by using roller bearings, by using coolants also. Coolant also will have the property of lubrication. So that's why then when we are cutting, if you use coolant, the power take less. The consumption will be less. It will complete fast. The movement will take free. That's why we can save the power. So because of friction, it reduces the speed. Oil is not there, the speed will be reduced. If oil is there, the speed will be increased. So the causes of friction. That's why whenever you are using lubricants, the friction will be reduced. Either grease or oil. Ball bearings, roller bearings, if you are using, the free movement will get, the friction will be reduced. Do you know friction? This is one body surface, this is another body surface. Both are joined together. The force which is created between the two surfaces is called friction. This definition only I explained. Friction is the force created between the two bodies offered to resistance, offered to motion. Kadalakunda unche. Is it clear? So in this, what are the advantages? Friction is needful to stop. Friction is needful to move. Friction is needful to run. Friction is needful to roll. Friction essential. Friction everywhere there is a friction. So that's what the friction lesson I will write on the board. Copy it now. Okay. So what are the advantages? We cannot walk. We cannot run. We cannot jump. Write something about vehicles, whatever it may be, about machines. Machines will not move. To move the machines, gear drive. There is a belt drive. Belt is rotating with the friction. No gear. Gears also will have the friction because that also involute curve is there. In that involute curve it is rotating. Otherwise that also will not move. Then bearings also, everywhere there is a friction. These are the advantages. The trains cannot run. The buses will not move without friction. Like that you write advantages. Disadvantages. What are the disadvantages of friction? Heat is generated. I am continuously rubbing, heat will be generated. No? So heat is generated. Continuously heat is generated, the surface becomes spoiled. The lines will be formed. Because of the friction, grooves will be formed. The machine becomes spoiled. So bearings you are not using, continuously rotating, you are not using oil. The friction is generated, the motor will burn. That means burning of the motor, because of you are not using oil, because of the friction, motor will burn. That's why the maintenance will be there every 2 months, 3 months like that. Then you are not using oil, the surface of the bed and carriage becomes spoiled. So that also, you are not using oil for the center becomes jammed and weld off in the job. That weld అయిపోతుంది ఆ పాయింట్ దాకా కట్ అయిపోయింది. That is the friction. These days they are doing friction welding. Both are joined to two parts joined like this. One tool will come and welding like this, friction welding. There is no electrode they are not using because of the heat. These two are joined. You know, blacksmith heating the metal and joining the two rods. Have you seen? Blacksmith is doing that, joining the parts. The same way, when it gets red heat, the metal will burn and join, melt and join, like that, friction welding. So disadvantages: motors become spoil, lathe machine parts become spoil, cycle parts become spoil, everything becomes spoil. So we can reduce the friction by using lubricants. So in this there are types of friction. One is, what are the types? So friction definition over, then advantages over, then disadvantages over, then after this reduce the friction by using lubricants, coolants, ball bearings, everything we can write it. So causes of friction, in the disadvantages, causes of friction you can write. Causes: you are not using oil, the parts become spoiled. You are not using grease for the bearings, the motor will burn after some time. You are not using oil for the machine, the parts will worn out. That means spoil, will not give accuracy. Like that you can write. Advantages you know very well. What are the advantages? We can run, we can walk. We can walk without slipping. That is the friction. Because of the friction, we are walking without slipping. Then sometimes when it is wet surface is there, sometimes we will slip off, we will fall down. Okay? So like that, these are all there. Then types of friction. In these types of friction, static, dynamic. Static friction, dynamic friction. What is the static friction? Stationary. We'll say stationary. Static means not moving. So the body is laid down on the table. That is friction. In the static friction, sometimes the body will start to move or equal to the force. That is limiting friction. Limiting friction. I will give all the definition. Then in this dynamic friction, sliding friction, then rolling friction. Because movement, where there is a movement, that is a dynamic or kinematic we can say. Kinetic motion or dynamic motion, both we can call it as. Then these are all over coefficient of friction. For example, the body is like this. This is the body, listen. Then after that I will give you. Then this is the bottom. There is one force is pulling up, one force is pulling down. When I am keeping the body like this, both forces are acting. Is it real or not? So what force is applied downwards? Gravitational force we are telling, body weight depends on that. So what is the force opposed to that one? To stand that, the table is bearing that load. Is it clear? So this is the reactional force. This is the weight of the body. Okay? I wanted to move this body this side. This force which is applied is called P, power. The frictional force which is opposite to motion is called F, you can call it as frictional force. So that means the body is rubbing, this weight plus the body is rubbing force, both will be applied. That is called the frictional force. Okay? Then this is the weight of the body. This is a reactional force which is giving opposite to the weight. This is the pulling force, that is power. This is frictional force. Like this on the body will be applied. There is a coefficient of friction, another one. That coefficient of friction is this friction is coefficient of friction. It is the frictional force. This F by R or P by W. How we are applying the component forces. That means force applied by weight of the body is coefficient of friction. It is the ratio between the frictional force and the normal reaction. It is the ratio between the frictional force and the normal reaction, F by R. Then otherwise P by W. Like that will be given. That is the coefficient of friction. Is it clear? What we learned?